Maybe small contractors should learn when to stay seated. Victoria Hayes let the words hang beneath the bright auditorium lights as nearly 200 Westbridge Dynamics employees turned toward Nathan Cole. Nathan stood beside an empty chair in the 6th row, one hand holding a worn leather notebook, the other resting near the temporary badge clipped to his faded navy jacket. Contractor. Nothing about him suggested influence. At 42, the white American single father looked more like a man who repaired machinery than someone who belonged in a multi-million-dollar technology review. Victoria, polished in a charcoal executive suit, stood beneath the enormous Aegis display with the confidence of a CEO accustomed to controlling every room she entered. "You interrupted my chief engineer twice," she said. "Once," Nathan replied. "You challenged a validated system. I questioned one signal, a signal my team already cleared. They cleared the corrected output." A few employees exchanged glances. Victoria gave a thin smile. "And your little engineering shop somehow knows better?" Nathan remained quiet. "No anger, no wounded pride." He glanced toward the digital clock above the rear doors. 2:43 p.m., 37 minutes until Emma's school dismissed. Victoria noticed. "Are we boring you, Mr. Cole?" "No." "Then why do you keep checking the time?" "I have to pick up my daughter." A few uncomfortable laughs moved through the room. Victoria looked almost amused. "We're reviewing technology tied to a contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And you're worried about school pickup?" Nathan met her eyes. "My daughter is 10. She worries when I'm late." The laughter disappeared. "Then perhaps you should leave this work to people who have time for it." Nathan absorbed the remark without changing expression. Some men defended dignity by raising their voices. Nathan had learned that dignity often became strongest when it stayed quiet. "Ms. Hayes, I'm not asking you to trust me." "Good. I'm asking you to test the raw signal." Victoria turned toward the screen. "Daniel, show him the validation result." Chief Engineer Daniel Brooks displayed a green performance graph. Aegis automatically corrected the deviation. Final variance remained under 0.2%. Nathan nodded. "Disable automatic correction." Daniel hesitated. Victoria folded her arms. "What?" "Because every 11 minutes, the secondary channel drifts in the same direction before correction hides it. That isn't failure." "I didn't say it was." "Then what exactly are you suggesting?" Nathan opened his notebook. "That your system may be correcting something nobody has explained." Silence returned. Near the aisle, a young intern named Megan Price lowered her eyes. Nathan noticed. "You've seen it before," he said. Megan froze. Victoria looked at her. "Have you?" Megan swallowed. "I submitted a report 6 weeks ago." Daniel turned sharply. "What report?" "Secondary channel drift." It was marked resolved. Nathan looked toward Victoria. "Was it independently tested?" "Mr. Cole, this meeting is not becoming an investigation into every junior report. It should become one when the junior report matches the current evidence." Victoria's patience hardened. "You were hired as an outside contractor, not as an executive auditor." Nathan checked the clock once more, then closed his notebook. "Then give me 10 minutes." "For what?" "Run the Mercer protocol." Something changed immediately. An older engineer in the front row lifted his head. Another stopped typing. Victoria noticed neither. "The Mercer protocol," she repeated with a faint laugh. "Is that another procedure from your 14-person shop?" Nathan's face remained calm. "No." "Then who exactly is Mercer?" The older engineer slowly pushed back his chair. Nathan looked at the faded initials inside the notebook and answered with quiet precision. "Dr. William Mercer." The chair scraped softly against the floor. The older engineer stood. Then another veteran engineer rose beside him. Across the auditorium, a third person stood without saying a word. Victoria's smile disappeared as she looked around. "Why are people standing?" Before Nathan could answer, the auditorium doors opened, and Chairman Charles Westbridge walked in. He saw Nathan, saw the notebook, and stopped. Then his eyes moved to Victoria. "You asked who?" "William Mercer was," Charles said quietly. "You should be asking why Nathan Cole is carrying his notebook." Charles Westbridge walked slowly down the center aisle, and the employees who had risen remained standing. Victoria looked from them to Nathan, her confidence giving way to confusion. Charles, I know Mercer was important to the company's early research, but what does that have to do with him? Charles stopped beside Nathan. More than you realize. Nathan quietly closed the notebook. Charles, we have a system to test. And we will. Then let's test it. Victoria stared at Nathan. You knew the chairman personally? For a long time. And you decided not to mention that. You never asked who I knew. You asked whether my evidence was valid. The answer landed harder than any argument. Charles looked toward Daniel Brooks. Run the Mercer protocol. Daniel immediately turned to his workstation. Victoria raised a hand. Wait, before we change a final validation sequence, I want to understand what we're doing. Charles nodded. That's reasonable. The Mercer protocol removes every corrective layer and forces the underlying channels to operate independently. William designed it because he believed a system should never be allowed to hide uncertainty behind successful output. Nathan glanced toward Megan, especially when someone already reported the uncertainty. Victoria followed his gaze. Megan looked nervous beneath the attention of the room. Bring up her report, Victoria said. Daniel searched the archive. After several seconds, a document appeared on the screen. Submitted 6 weeks earlier by Megan Price. Secondary channel drift at recurring intervals. Recommended independent raw channel review. Status, resolved. Victoria's face tightened. Who resolved it? Daniel examined the record. Automated triage routed it to systems validation. The team confirmed corrected output remained within tolerance. Did anyone speak to Megan? Silence answered first. Apparently not, Daniel admitted. Megan looked down. Nathan spoke gently. How long did you spend preparing that report? Almost 3 days. Why? Because I thought I was wrong. And after 3 days, I thought the system might be wrong. Nathan nodded. That's what engineering is supposed to sound like. Victoria looked at the young intern, then at the enormous green Aegis dashboard. For the first time that afternoon, she seemed less concerned with defending the project than understanding it. Run the test. Daniel disabled automatic correction. The auditorium lights dimmed as 12 simulated hours began moving across the screen. For the first few cycles, the secondary channel remained close to baseline. Then the drift appeared. 11 minutes later, it appeared again. By the 6th simulated hour, the variance had doubled. By the 10th, Aegis continued reporting high confidence even as the raw channel moved steadily away from its expected range. Daniel leaned toward the monitor. That shouldn't be happening. Megan whispered. That's exactly what I saw. Victoria heard her. You were right. Megan looked startled. Ms. Hayes, your report should never have been closed without this test. Nathan checked the clock. 2:51 p.m. Charles noticed. Emma, 29 minutes. Victoria's expression changed the name. Your daughter. Nathan nodded. This time, there was no laughter. Charles turned toward the room. Now perhaps everyone should understand why Mercer matters. Nathan gave him a warning look, but Charles continued. 20 years ago, William Mercer had another system producing beautiful corrected results while hiding an unexplained raw deviation. Investors wanted the demonstration to proceed. Senior engineers wanted the schedule protected. William wanted everyone to trust his judgment. Charles looked directly at Nathan. One 22-year-old engineer refused. Victoria stared at him. Nathan. He stopped the demonstration. An older engineer near the front spoke softly. I was there. Charles nodded. Mercer was furious. 3 weeks later, Nathan's concern was proven correct. He paused. After that, William stopped calling Nathan his junior engineer. Charles looked at the worn notebook in Nathan's hand. He called him the conscience of my work. Nathan said nothing. Charles reached into his jacket and removed a sealed document. And before William Mercer died, he made one final decision about every system descended from his architecture. Victoria looked at the document, then at Nathan. Charles placed it on the table between them. He gave final certification authority to one person. The room became perfectly still. Charles turned toward Nathan Cole. You. Victoria stared at the sealed document, but Nathan did not reach for it. That authority doesn't make my concern correct, he said. The evidence does. Charles gave a small nod. as though Nathan had just demonstrated why Mercer had chosen him. Daniel Brooks remained at the workstation, studying the failed simulation. The recurring drift is real. We can isolate the source, but Aegis cannot pass today. Victoria slowly lowered herself into the chair beside the stage. 200 employees watched the woman who had controlled the room minutes earlier confront something more difficult than a technical failure. She had judged the messenger before examining the message. "So you could refuse certification right now," she said. Nathan nodded. "Yes, and that would stop the contract. Until the system meets the standard. Do you understand what that could cost this company?" "Yes. Jobs could depend on this." Nathan's voice remained quiet, which is exactly why certification cannot become a ceremony where everyone is afraid to say no. Victoria looked toward Megan. The young intern still sat with her hands folded tightly around a notebook. "Megan, come up here." Megan hesitated, then approached the stage. Victoria turned the microphone away, so the moment felt less like a performance. "When your report was closed, why didn't you escalate it?" "I almost did. Why didn't you?" Megan glanced around the auditorium. "I'm an intern. Everyone reviewing Aegis has more experience than I do. I figured if they said it was fine, I was probably the problem." Nathan's eyes softened. "That sentence is the problem." Victoria looked at him. What would Mercer have done? 20 years ago? Probably argued with her for an hour. A few veteran engineers smiled. Later in his life, he would have asked her to prove it. Charles added, "Nathan changed that." About him. Victoria's gaze returned to the worn leather notebook. "What exactly happened between you and Mercer?" Nathan checked the clock. 2:56 p.m., the short version? "Please." "I told a brilliant man he was wrong. He told me I was inexperienced. I refused to sign his validation sheet. 3 weeks later, the flaw appeared under extended testing. And after that, Nathan paused. He apologized. Charles smiled. "You're leaving out the interesting part." "Charles." Mercer offered him a permanent partnership. Victoria looked surprised. At 22, and eventually control of the research division. Nathan's jaw tightened slightly. "That isn't relevant." "Maybe it is," Victoria said, "because you're standing here with a 14-person company instead." Silence returned. Nathan looked toward the clock, then toward the notebook in his hand. "Years later, my wife Laura got sick." His voice stayed steady, but the room seemed to grow quieter around it. Her treatment schedule didn't care about board meetings. Emma was 4. I had a choice between building the career everyone expected and being where my family needed me. Victoria's expression changed. "You left." "I went home." "Mercer let you walk away?" "He understood eventually." Charles spoke softly. Nathan also turned down equity that would be worth several $1,000,000 today. Victoria remembered her own words about his small shop and school pickup. Shame moved across her face. "I mocked the two things you chose deliberately." Nathan did not answer immediately. Grace sometimes meant refusing to make another person's regret heavier than necessary. "You didn't know?" he said. "I didn't ask." "No." That single word carried more truth than accusation. Victoria stood. "Then I'm asking now. What do we do?" Nathan looked at Daniel, then Megan, then the rows of employees who had watched everything unfold. Aegis certification stops for 90 days. Charles raised an eyebrow. "The technical correction may take 2 weeks. I'm not testing only Aegis." Victoria understood first. "You're testing us." "I'm testing whether the next Megan Price can stop this room without needing William Mercer's name behind. Her." Victoria looked at the sealed certification authority lying untouched on the table. "And if we fail?" Nathan picked up his jacket. "Then Aegis fails. And if we pass?" Nathan glanced at the clock. 3:02 p.m., 18 minutes remained. "Then you won't need to ask me." He started toward the exit, but Victoria called after him. "Nathan." He turned. "I'm sorry." 200 people heard it. Nathan nodded once. "Use the 90 days well." As he left, Charles looked at Victoria and quietly tapped the sealed document. "There's something else Mercer wrote about Nathan that he doesn't know." Victoria stared at him. "What?" Charles looked toward the closing doors. Why he never intended Nathan's authority to last forever. At 3:19 p.m., Nathan's pickup rolled into the elementary school lane with 1 minute to spare. Emma climbed into the passenger seat, carrying a purple backpack and a cardboard model of the solar system. You made it. I said I would. Last time you said that, you were 7 minutes late. Nathan smiled. Engineers improve through testing. Emma studied him. Was your meeting bad? Nathan pulled away from the curb. Complicated. Did somebody break something? Not exactly. Did you fix it? Nathan thought of Megan Price sitting beneath 200 pairs of eyes, believing experience mattered more than what she had discovered. They have to fix it themselves. Emma accepted that answer more easily than most adults would have. At Westbridge Dynamics, Victoria remained in the auditorium long after employees returned to work. Charles sat beside her with Mercer's sealed document on the table. What did he mean? She asked. About Nathan's authority ending? Charles opened the envelope, but did not remove the final page. William understood something late in life. Giving one honorable man extraordinary authority can protect a system, but it cannot repair a culture. Victoria looked toward the empty chair Nathan had occupied. So Nathan was never supposed to remain the gatekeeper forever. No, he was supposed to remain until Westbridge learned how not to need him. Victoria lowered her eyes. And today we proved we still do. Charles said nothing. Silence was sometimes the only answer Pride could hear. The following Monday, Victoria gathered department leaders at 8 a.m. We're changing the review structure. Daniel Brooks looked at the proposed policy. Anonymous technical escalation? Yes. Even interns can freeze validation. Anyone presenting reproducible evidence can request independent review. One vice president frowned. That could slow everything down. Victoria looked at him. Then we will become slower at making preventable mistakes. Megan was invited into the room 15 minutes later. She expected questions about Aegis. Instead, Victoria handed her a draft. Tell me what's wrong with this. Megan blinked. The policy? All of it. I'm an intern. Victoria paused. 90 days had begun with the exact sentence Nathan had warned her about. That's irrelevant. You're the person who experienced the failure we're trying to correct. Megan read carefully. Then this part doesn't work. Every executive turned toward her. She pointed to the escalation rule. It still requires a department manager before independent review. If the manager is the reason someone is afraid to speak, nothing changes. Victoria looked at Daniel. Remove the requirement. No argument. No humiliation. Just correction. Over the next 6 weeks, Aegis changed with the company around it. Engineers isolated the secondary drift to a synchronization assumption inherited from an older Mercer Air module. Daniel's team rebuilt the interface. Megan participated in every validation session. 3 other junior employees raised concerns unrelated to Aegis. 2 proved insignificant after testing. 1 exposed a documentation error that had existed for 11 months. Victoria thanked all 3 publicly. Meanwhile, Nathan received no updates. That had been his condition. He worked at Coal Engineering, packed Emma's lunches, reviewed homework at the kitchen table, and refused every attempt Charles made to tell him whether Westbridge was improving. On the 63rd evening, Nathan opened Mercer's notebook while Emma worked on fractions beside him. A sentence in William's handwriting caught his attention. The purpose of authority is to build the day when authority is unnecessary. Nathan stared at it longer than usual. Dad, Emma asked. You're doing the thing. What thing? Looking at words like they just talked to you. Nathan smiled and closed the notebook. 89 days after the auditorium incident, Charles called. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Does Victoria know? She thinks your review is next week. Nathan was silent. And Megan? She knows nothing. Good. Charles hesitated. There's something in Mercer's final document you still haven't read. Nathan looked toward the notebook. Why not? Because William ordered me to show it only after Westbridge passed the test without knowing you were watching. Nathan's expression changed. And if they fail, then the envelope stays closed. The next morning, Nathan entered Westbridge through the public lobby wearing the same faded navy jacket. No executive greeted him. No famous name announced him. He slipped in the back row of a technical review where Victoria stood before nearly 200 employees. 7 minutes later, a newly hired engineer raised her hand and said, Ms. Hayes, I think Aegis is wrong. Nathan leaned forward. Victoria slowly placed her presentation remote on the table. Victoria did not ask the young engineer for her title. She did not glance toward Daniel Brooks for permission. She simply lowered the remote and said, "Show us what you found." Nathan remained silent in the last row. The engineer, 26-year-old Rachel Morgan, walked toward the nearest workstation. The new synchronization layer passes normal validation, but during rapid temperature changes, Channel 4 briefly references the previous calibration cycle. Daniel leaned closer. "How long is the delay?" "Less than half a second." A senior manager exhaled. "That's well inside correction tolerance." Victoria turned toward him. For one uncomfortable second, the room seemed to remember another afternoon and another warning. "Correction tolerance isn't the question," she said. "We need to know why the raw channel is delayed." Nathan's expression softened. Rachel nodded quickly. "I prepared a simulation. Run it. It'll take about 9 minutes. Then everyone in this room has 9 minutes." No laughter followed. Nobody complained about schedules. The simulation began. For the first 4 minutes, nothing appeared unusual. Rachel shifted nervously. "Maybe I misread it." Victoria shook her head. "Don't withdraw a concern because the room is waiting. Let the evidence finish speaking." Nathan looked down at Mercer's notebook. He could almost hear William arguing with that sentence 20 years earlier, then eventually writing it down himself. At minute 7, Channel 4 hesitated. The delay lasted only a fraction of a second, but the archive calibration value appeared exactly where Rachel predicted. Daniel immediately isolated the event. "She's right. Victoria stepped closer. Does it affect Aegis output?" "Not under this simulation." "That wasn't my question. Could under different conditions?" Daniel considered the data. "Possibly." Then validation pauses. The room remained calm. 3 months earlier, stopping validation had sounded like rebellion. Now it sounded like engineering. Megan Price opened the independent review system, logging Rachel's concern. Victoria Nadith. Assign reviewers from 2 departments outside Daniel's team. Already selected. Rachel looked almost embarrassed by the attention. "I didn't mean to stop the whole meeting." Victoria smiled gently. "That's exactly what you were supposed to do." Nathan checked the clock. 9:24 a.m. There was no school pickup pressing against the morning, but old habits made him measure time carefully anyway. Charles Westbridge entered through the rear door and quietly sat beside him. "She doesn't know you're here," Charles whispered. "Keep it that way." "You've seen enough?" "Not yet." Charles looked toward Rachel. William would have liked her. William would have argued with her first. "True." Nathan almost smiled. 20 minutes later, Daniel's independent reviewers confirmed the issue. It was minor, correctable, and real. More importantly, nobody had needed Nathan, Charles, or William Mercer to make the room respected. Victoria addressed the employees. Rachel's position did not make her warning important. The evidence did. Remember that distinction. Nathan closed the notebook. That was the moment he knew. Westbridge had changed. Charles seemed to read his expression. "Ready for the envelope?" After the review, the meeting continued another 40 minutes. 2 additional concerns were raised. One proved valid. One did not. Both received the same patience. When the final simulation passed, Victoria still refused to celebrate until Megan confirmed there were no unresolved objections. "Independent review complete," Megan said. "No open concerns." Nathan finally stood. Megan noticed him first. Her eyes widened. Rachel turned next. Then Daniel. A quiet wave of recognition moved across the auditorium until Victoria looked toward the back row. For several seconds, she simply stared at the man she had once humiliated in this same room. "You were here the whole time. Long enough. Did we pass?" Nathan looked at Rachel, then Megan, then the 200 employees who had learned to stop for evidence without first asking who was speaking. "Yes." Charles rose beside him and removed Mercer's sealed envelope from his jacket. Then William's final instruction can finally be opened. Nathan's smile disappeared. Charles handed him the envelope. Inside was one handwritten page Nathan had never seen. He read the first sentence and stopped breathing for a moment. William had written it 20 years earlier. "Nathan Cole was never chosen to inherit my authority. He was chosen to teach this company how to live without it. Nathan, read the sentence again, slower this time. For 20 years, he had carried Mercer's authority like a responsibility that could never be set down. Now William's handwriting told him the opposite. Charles watched quietly as Nathan continued. Mercer had written that technical guardianship was necessary only while Westbridge depended on hierarchy to recognize truth. The moment an unknown employee could challenge leadership, receive independent review, and stop validation without invoking Mercer or Nathan, the extraordinary authority would expire. Nathan looked toward Rachel. You completed the condition. Rachel blinked. I did. You raised a concern without knowing I was here. He turned toward Victoria. And you stopped the review without knowing I was watching. Victoria understood. So this was never really about whether Aegis became perfect. No system becomes perfect. It was about whether we became accountable. Nathan nodded. Charles handed him the legal attachment. William instructed the board to terminate your certification authority once the condition was independently demonstrated. Nathan smiled faintly. He planned my retirement from a job I never applied for. That sounds like William. A few veteran engineers laughed softly. Victoria looked at Nathan differently now, not with embarrassment or awe, but respect. Does losing that authority bother you? It means the promise worked. Most people don't surrender power that easily. Nathan closed Mercer's letter. Power was never the promise. He looked across the auditorium. Trust was. Megan stepped closer. Then who certifies Aegis now? Nathan pointed toward the independent review record. You do. Daniel does. Rachel does. Victoria does. The review board does. Nobody gets one unquestioned signature anymore. Charles smiled. Exactly what William wanted. Victoria walked toward the stage and faced the employees. 3 months ago, I believed accountability moved downward. Executives questioned managers. Managers questioned engineers. Engineers questioned interns. She paused. Nathan taught us that truth has to move in every direction. Nathan shook his head. Megan taught you first. Megan looked surprised. You were just the first person who refused to let us ignore her, which shouldn't have been necessary. Victoria nodded. And now it isn't. Daniel brought up the final Aegis results. Every raw channel remained stable. Rachel's calibration issue had been corrected and independently verified. Megan confirmed the archive contained no unresolved objections. Charles placed the certification document on the table. Instead of sliding it toward Nathan, he turned it toward the review team. Daniel signed first. Megan signed second. Rachel hesitated when the pen reached her. I've been here 11 weeks. Victoria smiled. Does the evidence become less accurate because you're new? Rachel looked at Nathan. He said nothing. She understood and signed. Victoria added her name last. Charles reviewed the page. Aegis is certified. Applause filled the auditorium, but Nathan remained focused on Mercer's letter. At the bottom, beneath the legal instruction, William had added one personal sentence. When they finally listen without asking who you are, Nathan, go home. Your real legacy is waiting there. Nathan's eyes rested on those words. Emma had been 4 when Mercer last saw her. William had somehow understood what Nathan himself had needed years to learn. A career could build impressive things, but fatherhood measured success differently. Nathan checked the clock. 10:41 a.m., plenty of time before school pickup. He folded the letter and placed it inside the notebook. Victoria approached him. What happens to you now? Lunch, probably. She laughed. I mean after this. Coal engineering opens tomorrow at 8. 14 employees? Still 14. No executive office? Absolutely not. Charles walked over carrying another document. You may want to reconsider that answer. Nathan eyed the paper suspiciously. What did William do now? Nothing. This comes from the Westbridge board. Victoria smiled. Before you refuse, read the first line. Nathan did. It was not an employment offer. It proposed something far stranger. The creation of a permanent independent review institute bearing no executive's name and controlled by no single company. Nathan looked up. Charles spoke quietly. There's only one condition. What? The board wants you to design it. Nathan glanced toward Megan and Rachel. For the first time that morning, He did not immediately say no. Nathan read the proposal twice before setting it on the table. I'll design it under 3 conditions. Charles smiled. I knew 14 employees couldn't contain you forever. I'm keeping 14. Of course you are. Victoria folded her arms. What are the conditions? Nathan pointed toward Megan and Rachel. First, the Institute cannot report to Westbridge, its board, or any company funding it. Second, every review panel includes someone with less than 3 years of experience. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Deliberately, experience recognizes patterns. Inexperience sometimes notices the assumptions everyone else stopped questioning. Rachel smiled. And the third, Nathan looked at the clock. No meetings after 3. Charles laughed. Victoria did not. She understood immediately. Emma. Nathan gathered Mercer's notebook and headed toward the doors, but Victoria followed him into the hallway. Can I ask you something? Sure. When I humiliated you that first day, why didn't you tell everyone who you were? Nathan stopped beside the windows overlooking the parking lot. What would that have changed? Everything. That was the problem. Victoria fell silent. Nathan continued. If you respected me because Mercer respected me, then Megan still wouldn't matter until somebody important approved of her. I needed to know whether this company could learn to respect evidence before status. And if I had failed, I would have refused certification. No second chance. Nathan looked at her. The 90 days were the second chance. Victoria nodded slowly. I deserve that. It wasn't about what you deserved. It was about what Westbridge needed. Those words stayed with her. 6 weeks later, the Independent Engineering Review Institute opened in a modest brick building 3 miles from Westbridge headquarters. Nathan refused the glass office the board had planned for him and chose a small room beside the testing lab. His door displayed no title, only his name. Megan joined the institute after completing her internship, while Rachel remained at Westbridge as one of its youngest validation engineers. Nathan divided his time between coal engineering and the institute, leaving every afternoon before 3. One Tuesday, Victoria arrived carrying 2 coffees and found him packing his laptop at 2:47. Important executive meeting? She asked. Science fair. More important? Nathan looked genuinely confused. Obviously, she laughed. Then her expression became serious. There's something Charles never told you. Nathan paused. I'm starting to dislike sentences that begin that way. Victoria handed him a photocopy from Westbridge's archives. It was an old memo written by Mercer shortly after Nathan had left corporate life to care for Laura. Nathan recognized William's handwriting immediately. He read silently. Nathan Cole believes he walked away from his greatest work. He is mistaken. The most important system he will ever build is a life in which his daughter never has to wonder whether she mattered more than his career. Nathan's eyes remained on the page. He never showed me this. Charles found it last week. Nathan folded the copy carefully. At 3:18, he reached Emma's school. She climbed into the pickup holding a blue ribbon from a science fair. Second place. Nathan examined it dramatically. Clearly, the judges require independent review. Emma laughed. Dad, I know. Congratulations. She noticed a folded paper beside him. What's that? Something an old friend wrote about us. About me? Mostly. Emma smiled and leaned back against the seat. Nathan started the truck, but his phone rang before he could pull away. Charles. Nathan, turn on the radio. Why? The Aegis contract announcement just went public. Nathan sighed. Charles, I'm with Emma. That's why you need to hear this. Nathan switched on the local business station. The reporter was describing Westbridge's successful certification and its new independent review model. Then came the final sentence. The board had voted unanimously to rename the institute after the engineer whose principles had inspired it. Nathan's expression tightened. Charles, I specifically said no names. Charles chuckled through the speaker. They didn't name it after you. Nathan looked toward Emma as the radio announcer revealed the name chosen by 200 Westbridge employees. The Laura Cole Independent Review Institute, the announcer said. Nathan did not move. Emma looked from the radio to her father. Mom. Nathan swallowed. Yeah. Charles remained on the phone. The employees voted on it. Unanimously. You should have asked me. Victoria wanted to. Megan said you would refuse. Emma smiled. Megan sounds smart. Nathan gave her a look. Very smart, apparently. The announcer continued, explaining that the Institute honored Laura Cole not because she had been an engineer, executive, or investor, but because the choices made during her illness had shaped a philosophy placing human responsibility above prestige. Nathan switched off the radio. For several seconds, only the soft hum of the pickup filled the silence. Are you mad? Emma asked. I don't know yet. Mom would probably think it was nice. Your mom also enjoyed winning arguments after she wasn't here to hear my response. Emma laughed, and Nathan finally smiled. 2 days later, he arrived at Westbridge for the Institute's formal dedication. Nearly 200 employees filled the same auditorium where Victoria had once questioned his place in the room. Nathan wore the same navy jacket. He had considered a suit, then decided Laura would have teased him for trying too hard. Victoria stood at the microphone. 3 months ago, this room taught me the most expensive lesson of my career without costing us a dollar. A few people smiled. I believed authority gave certain voices more weight. Nathan Cole showed me that truth does not become more accurate because a powerful person says it. She looked toward Megan. And Megan Price showed me what happens when organizations forget that. Megan stood beside Rachel near the front row. Victoria continued. This institute will carry Laura Cole's name because Nathan's greatest act of leadership happened far from any boardroom. When his family needed him, he chose presence over prestige. That choice shaped everything he later demanded from us. Dignity, responsibility, second chances, and respect. Nathan lowered his eyes. Emma slipped her hand into his. You okay? Your mother would hate all this attention. So do you? Exactly. Charles approached the microphone holding Mercer's original notebook. There is one final matter. Nathan immediately frowned. Charles. Laughter moved gently through the room. Relax. No more secret documents. Charles opened the notebook. William Mercer once believed great systems required great people at the top. Nathan taught him something different. Great systems require ordinary people to be heard before anyone discovers whether they are extraordinary. He closed the notebook and looked toward Victoria. That lesson now belongs to Westbridge. Victoria stepped away from the microphone. Nathan, would you come forward? Nathan shook his head. No, why? Because Megan should. The room became quiet. Megan stared at him. Nathan continued. The Institute exists because her warning was ignored. If today ends with another powerful name at the center, we learn nothing. Megan slowly walked toward the stage. Nathan remained beside Emma. Victoria handed Megan the dedication plaque. Then you do it. Megan unveiled the simple inscription. Laura Cole, Independent Review Institute. Evidence before status. The room rose in applause. Nathan stayed seated for a moment, overwhelmed less by recognition than by what had changed. Emma leaned toward him. Dad, everybody's standing. Nathan looked around. They're standing for the idea. Charles, several rows away, quietly shook his head. Nathan noticed. What? Charles smiled. Not all of them. One by one, employees turned away from the stage and toward Nathan. Victoria did the same. Then Megan. Then Rachel. The applause faded into silence as nearly 200 people remained standing. Nathan's eyes moved across the room he had once entered as an unknown contractor. Nobody said William Mercer's name. Nobody mentioned certification authority. Nobody needed to. Victoria looked at him and spoke softly enough that only those nearby could hear. This time, Nathan, they already know why they're standing. Nathan remained seated for 3 quiet seconds while nearly 200 people stood around him. Emma squeezed his hand. Dad, he looked at her. I know. You should stand too. Nathan smiled and rose, not because he believed the moment belonged to him, but because refusing it now would mean refusing the grace behind it. The room stayed silent. No applause. No speeches. Just respect. Victoria stepped closer. The first time you stood in this room, I tried to make you feel small. Nathan met her eyes. And now I understand that I was the one making the room smaller. Nathan nodded. Then make sure it stays bigger after I leave. Victoria smiled. That's the plan. Megan approached with the dedication plaque still in her hands. Mr. Cole, I wanted to thank you. For what? For believing my report. Nathan shook his head. I didn't believe it. Megan looked confused. You tested it. Exactly. Respect doesn't mean assuming someone is right. It means giving them a fair chance to prove what they saw. Rachel nodded from beside her. Evidence before status. Every time, Charles watched from the aisle, his expression carrying the quiet satisfaction of a man who had finally completed a promise made decades earlier. He held Mercer's notebook toward Nathan. This belongs to you. Nathan looked at the worn leather cover, then surprised everyone by pushing it gently back. No, put it in the Institute. You've carried it for 20 years. That's long enough. Charles studied him. You're sure? Nathan looked toward Emma. I already know what I need from it. Later that afternoon, Nathan and Emma drove home beneath a pale autumn sky. At 4:12 p.m., they stopped at the small cemetery where Laura rested beneath a maple tree. Emma placed her blue science fair ribbon beside the flowers. Mom would have said second place means I need a rematch. Nathan laughed softly. That sounds like her. Emma looked at him. Would she be proud of you? Nathan considered the question. She'd probably ask whether I remembered to buy milk. Emma laughed. Then Nathan's expression softened. But I hope so. He told Laura about the Institute, about Megan, about Rachel, and about the name 200 employees had chosen. He did not tell the story like a victory. There had been no enemy to defeat. Victoria had been given a second chance and used it. Westbridge had been given a warning and listened. Nathan had been given authority and learned when to release it. That was redemption, not reversing who held the power, but changing what power was for. 6 months later, the Laura Cole Institute had reviewed 37 engineering concerns from companies across the country. 11 came from employees with less than 2 years of experience. 4 came from interns. Every concern received the same process. Victoria visitive. Occasionally, never expecting special treatment. Megan became the Institute's youngest permanent reviewer. Rachel led Westbridge's new open validation program. And Nathan remained exactly what he had always wanted to be. An engineer who could leave work before 3 and a father whose daughter never had to wonder whether he would show up. One Friday afternoon, Emma waited outside Cole Engineering while Nathan locked the door. She noticed the small sign he had added beneath the company name. What does quiet dignity mean? Nathan looked at the words. It means you don't need to make someone smaller to prove you matter. Did Mercer teach you that? Nathan smiled. Eventually, we taught each other. They climbed into the old pickup. Across town, another Westbridge review was beginning. A junior employee raised her hand. Victoria immediately stopped speaking. What did you find? She asked. Nobody laughed. Nobody checked the employee's title. Nobody needed Nathan Cole in the room. And that was how Nathan knew the miracle was complete. The name that once made 200 people stand had opened the door, but the man who quietly walked through it taught them something greater. Dignity should never have to introduce itself before it is respected.